Today I'd like to show you how to resize 30-06 or 308 into 300 Savage. Before we begin, we're going to need a few tools. Resizing die, lubricant, some way of trimming the case to size. The deburring and chamfering tool is helpful, as is a primer pocket cleaner. A quick word on lubricants. I've tried several different lubricants. It is very important to have a good lubricant when you're resizing these dies. There's a lot of stress on the brass, and if you use the wrong lubricant, you will destroy more brass than you will resize. I first started using a no-name case lubricant from a local retailer. Unfortunately, this one didn't work all that well. I had about 50% of my brass fail in the resizing process. I then tried a product actually used in the steel industry. It's a fast drying graphite lubricant. It works great, makes it very easy to resize the brass. Only problem is you actually have an extra cleaning step to get the graphite off of the brass once it's done. The best no clean solution I found is Hornady one-shot case lube. I'm sure there are other products out there that are better, but I found this seems to work the best for me. I'm going to be resizing 30-06 brass. Just happen to have a lot of it. It's military surplus, which also means it's very thick walled, and we're trying to get it down to 300 Savage. There's actually quite a difference in the size. The worst part about resizing is if you look at the shoulder on a 300 Savage, it's very tight angle as opposed to the 30-06, which has a much shallower angle, which makes it much easier to resize. If you have a 308 or a 308 die, it's much better to use that as an intermediate step. Once again, it has the shallow neck, makes it much easier to resize, and you get much fewer problems from the brass, as opposed to using the 300 Savage die all the way down with a sharp shoulder. Unfortunately, I don't have a 308 die, so I just use a 300 Savage. This is a case that I just full length resized for illustration purposes. It's a 308 or a 30-06 full length resized down. That shoulder is at the 300 Savage level. You'll notice there's a lot of extra brass on it. This causes a lot of stress on the case, and as I rotate it, I don't know if you can see it, there is a dent, and there is a distinct angle on that neck as opposed to the rest of the case. That's going to affect accuracy. You really don't want to have that. So I suggest strongly trimming the brass somewhat before you resize it. Okay, so the first step is trimming. I usually have a guide set up along my bandsaw here so that I don't trim off too much brass, or too little in this case usually. But for the purposes of photography, I've removed that and I have raised the blade guide up. So, quick chop off some of the end of the brass. Now, you want to make sure that you leave some of that shoulder on there. That just helps guide it in through the die when you're resizing. You'll notice there is a significant burr from this process. This is where you would normally use your deburring tool to remove that. What's great about having a workshop is I have a belt sander. All woodworking tools will work with brass if they're of any quality. So I'm just going to quickly trim the brass on the edge, get rid of the burr. Okay, I've deburred the shells. This is the point where if you have 308, you would want to start working with your 308. Okay, I'm over at my press now. I've removed the, I've lubricated the brass, and I've removed the center mandrel on my press so that any extra brass can escape through the top, that which will be removed later when we are trimming it to length. So I just load it up. Nice easy push, and it is resized. Wait. So now we have our brass that is now resized. The exterior dimensions except for the overall length have been set. Okay, when trimming the case to length, this is what I recommend. Having some sort of case trimmer. This is a Hornady case trimmer. I've modified it with an RCBS 3-way trimmer, which I can only use one way at a time, but it will become clear in a little bit. You can't use it with a center mandrel because the case wall of the ammunition is too thick right now. So the inside diameter is too small to use any sort of an aligning fixture, so that has to be eliminated. Put your brass in, tighten it up, and trim it down. Now it's the proper length. You still have to deburr, dechamfer that area. We'll get to that in a minute, but your brass is the proper length now. Okay, I've changed my cutter to a neck sizing cutter. This is the part where you can really lose your brass fast. Just tighten it in here and very slowly trim. There you go, one trimmed case. Okay, now that we have trimmed it to length, we've fixed the wall thickness. Now we need to size the inside diameter, which means running it through the die a second time. Now we have the proper inside diameter, we have the proper wall thickness, proper length. It's all set to reload. Okay, when all is said and done, there are the 5 cases, neck sized, trimmed to length. The only thing that's left is you need to clean the primer pocket out if it's a swaged military case. And if it is a military case, you need to reduce your powder load because the wall thickness is going to be significantly thicker in this shell than it's going to be in a commercial brass. I have actually tried these exact same loads against some commercial brass. I'm not going to tell you which brand it is, but you can read it. I'm not happy with these. The main reason is the primer pockets on these. The primers fit in very loosely. You need to glue them. You need to put some sort of a primer sealer on them. The primers will back out under even the lightest pressure. You can almost seat the primer with your thumb. So I am not happy with this brass at all, but I used it as a comparative analysis as a commercial brass versus the military brass. I've used once fired 300 Savage brass with much better luck than with these particular components. Okay, this is some of my test data. If you look at this line here, this is actually IMR 4064 and a 300 Savage using 150 grain Hornady full metal jacket boat tail. This is 36 grains, this is 38 grains, and a resized Lake City 69 30-06 brass down to 300 Savage. If you look at 38 grains, these are the grains along the bottom, velocity here. So if you take 38 grains, you go over here to where the virgin Winchester brass was used. That's at 39.5 grains. You're at about 3% reduction in the grain. It's a 3% reduction in the volume of, in the weight of the powder will give you the same velocity. So it is very easy to overpressure. Going from some of my reloading books, the maximum pressure being, or the maximum capacity being 40 grains, say for IMR 4064, I have one that says 44 grains. I used 40 as a limit. The other lines here are the standard deviations, high and low. One standard deviation high and low for each case. Slightly larger standard deviation for the resized cartridge versus the versus the virgin brass, but really not significant. You're looking at not even 10 feet per second increase in standard deviation, so it's very insignificant. This is all the test loads and test data. If you want to pause it, you can read it, but I wanted to let you know, when you're resizing brass, be very careful that your velocity and your pressure will be very much higher for a given weight of powder. Okay, one thing you really want to be careful of when you're resizing is dings and dents. You can see right here there is a very large deformed section. You cannot fire form this out. That is in there. Also, what you will find a lot of times above these is you'll find a crease going up the neck. You will get a split case. Maybe not the first time you fire it, but definitely the second time. And I want you to be very cautious of these. Every time you get dents like this, if it's this bad, don't use it. There's another one. This actually pulled a hole in it. I was really surprised to see this. There's probably some sort of a flaw in the brass that this drawing process brought out. You can also anneal these because one of the problems with working the brass is this area up here gets very hard. You might want to anneal this because you will get gas leakage moving back the case. That is one thing that I've noticed. I don't usually anneal the cases, because if you over anneal the case, you will, the entire case, I've tried this. I don't know why I did it. I know it's bad. If you anneal too far down, this will get stuck in the breech of your gun and you'll be hard pressed to get it out. I've had to stick a rod down my barrel and knock some of these out when you don't do it properly. So if you don't know how to anneal, don't do it. There are plenty of other places on the web you can look for people who will teach you how to anneal properly. I'm just not going to do it in this. Take a 30-06, cut it down, or use a 308 and resize it to 300 Savage and get excellent performance. And I I've shot these 6-7 times now, and I have not had any of my brass fail. They just seem to last a lot better than anything you can buy commercially. So I hope you've found this somewhat educational. Have a great day. Bye.